Thank you for enabling this opportunity for us to spend time with my colleague and friend, Nilton Bonder, and to do so with the miracle of him sitting in Rio and us sitting in our respective locations. So a delight to see you, Rabbi Bonder, and to have this opportunity to learn from you. I thought the place to begin would be a little bit about yourself. You might share a little bit of your growing up, where your parents were from, and how your family and early life led to you becoming a rabbi. You're mute.
Okay, now I'm not okay.
Now you're good.
I was trying to get to activate, but fine. Very honored to be here with you, to be program 405, and to be with you, Elie. A pleasure to see you after probably like 2 years. I don't know, 2.5 years that was, right?
Yeah, just before COVID.
That was before COVID, right? So let me present myself. I'm Brazilian born. I was born in the south of Brazil in a city called Porto Alegre, the very south of Brazil, almost, close to Uruguay and Argentina. We are gauchos, like the Argentinians and Uruguayans. I moved to Rio when I was very young, and my family, my grandfather from my mother's side was from Russia. He fought for Russia on the Japanese-Russian War at the very beginning of the century, the last century. And he moved to Porto Alegre, and the rest of the family, one is from Ukraine, one was from Palestine, and one from Romania nowadays. And we moved to Rio when I was 6. And I was ordained by the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York in '86, and I have immediately come back to Brazil and have been a rabbi in Brazil since then. And I have an ordination from JTS. I also have an ordination from Reb Zalman Schachter, from the renewal movement in the U.S. For those of you that knew or know Rabbi Zalman Zichrono Livracha, he was a very, very important leading figure in American Judaism in the past few decades, and he managed to come to Brazil, I believe 5 times he came. And we were very close, and he ordained me to be the representative of the renewal movement also here in Brazil, which I never did in a formal way, but I have both ordinations from him and from the Jewish Theological Seminary. I've been, I started there are two, actually there were only one non-Orthodox synagogue in Rio. When I came back to Rio, I worked there for 2.5 years. And then I founded a new synagogue, which is the second non-Orthodox synagogue in town, which is the Jewish Congregation of Brazil. And that is over 33 years old now, and has grown to be around 620 family members in town.
Tell us about what prompted you to choose the rabbinate?
Well, I have a degree on mechanical engineering, which was my first option. I started doing my studies in Brazil, and I had to finish my last year in the US while I had already decided to go into the rabbinate. But I was invited to teach at a Jewish day school. And I was really impressed at the time of how non-interested the students were. You know, those were like high school level students that I was teaching. And I was very mobilized by the fact that most of them were really tired of having to repeat the same, go over even, you know, the Chagim. You know, I have this sort of interesting story. Well, it was Pesach many years ago, and I got into this classroom and I said, we have to prepare our Seder. And the youngsters were so fed up with having to every year redo the same thing and redo the same ritual. So they all started making faces and complaining. So I said, okay, you don't want to do the Seder? And they said, no, we don't want to do the Seder. I said, okay, fine. We're not going to do the Seder, but you have to be here because it's school time. You have to come, and we'll have a Seder, which is a non-Seder Seder. So they came, and I arranged the table in such a way that everybody would be sitting like in a Seder table. But I didn't put anything. There was no matzah. There were nothing, no symbols of Pesach whatsoever. And we sat around that table, and we were looking at each other. I wasn't saying anything, and we could hear from the other classes of the other classrooms, people singing all the Pesach songs and all that. So we were in silence, and nobody was saying anything. I wasn't saying anything until one of the students said something like, "What is different today than every other Seder?" So we started this discussion about freedom. What are the limits of freedom? And we got into this incredible conversation when the dean of the school that was visiting all the classrooms to see how the Sedarim were being done stepped into our classroom. And then there was this very, very awkward situation. And I tried to explain, and all the students came to help me and to explain what was happening. And they were really trying to defend me. And it was a very interesting moment. And then we had an incredible discussion about what freedom is and what are the limits of freedom. And we ended up singing the songs and doing a different Seder that day. And that really prompted me to think about maybe I should get involved into trying to make, to help the Jewish heritage to have, to improve its communication with youngsters and so on. And that was the beginning of it.
And why did you choose, first, the conservative movement, and secondly, instead of going to Buenos Aires to study at the Seminario, why did you choose to come to Jewish Theological Seminary?
So in reality, when I started to get interested in thinking about the rabbinate, I turned to a very special Lubavitch rabbi in Rio. Actually, he was one of the shlichim that the older Lubavitch Rebbe, not the past one, the former one, had sent the one that really sent the first shlichim of Lubavitch all over the world. And they sent this man, Rabbi Israel, what is his first name? He was the founder of an yeshiva here in Rio de Janeiro in the late 50s in Rio de Janeiro. And he left the city and he went to the mountains of Rio to a place called Petrópolis. And he founded this really nice, beautiful yeshiva that has, from the past 30 years, ordained most of the rabbis Orthodox rabbis in Rio and even in Brazil. And I started to study with him, and he was really pushing me to go into a Lubavitch yeshiva, but I really wanted to be like a bridge to the community, and I realized that I had to go to a more liberal take of Judaism to be able to do what I really wanted to do. But we kept like very close relationship for many years. I would go to the mountains to spend a day with him. Even when I was already ordained, I went there and we had a full day of study. His students would make faces because by then I was already a conservative rabbi, but we always kept our very, very special tie. And so that I decided to, I didn't think about becoming Reformed because it was not exactly what I wanted, but I was more in between choosing something more either Orthodox or conservative. And then the link was I went to São Paulo. It was Sukkot. I don't remember which year was that, 79 or something. And I went there to talk with Marshall Meyer, Rabbi Marshall Meyer, Zichrono Livracha, who was the dean of the rabbinical school in Buenos Aires, of the yeshiva, the seminario, as it is called to this day. And I went to talk to him, and he said to me, "Come to Buenos Aires." Well, every South American rabbi would do that, go to Buenos Aires and get ordained there. And I told him, I don't have any family in Buenos Aires. I don't have any family in New York. So for me to go to Buenos Aires or New York, it's quite the same in terms of experience. And he said to me, but JTS is a very, very difficult school. Very conservative school too. They will demand you, in terms of observation. You'll feel like you're in an Orthodox yeshiva. And I told him I'm ready for the challenge, and it was indeed a challenge.
So, as a fellow graduate of JTS, I appreciate the challenges that you had. I was 2 years behind you. Before we move to talking about the Brazilian community and what you found when you came back, you mentioned Reb Zalman, who many may not know who are listening in, who is a colorful shaper of Jewish life. In what way did Reb Zalman impact on your understanding of Judaism? A little bit about who he was and how he shaped you, and then we'll bring you back to becoming a leader.
Well, Rabbi Zalman was very much from that realm of Lubavitch. He was saved during the Second World War, taken from Europe to the U.S., and he was a rabbi for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Yeah, he was one of the golden boys of his time. He, together with Shlomo Carlebach, both of them were selected by the Lubavitcher Rebbe to be sent to universities around the United States. That was a big time, late 50s. Colleges were, very important in the education and formation of people. So the Rebbe had this interesting idea of sending shlichim to the universities. But what happens to both of them, that's why I'm mentioning Zalman and Carlebach, is that not only they did influence a lot of the students of the colleges of that time, but they themselves got quite influenced by the beginning of the 60s and so many transformations in behavior, transformations in the world. and they were very attuned to trying to translate Judaism in a way that would be exciting to the new generation. Carlebach went to music, and he became the singing rabbi that has influenced so much all synagogues around the world, from Reform to Orthodox. And Reb Zalman went a different path. He became very creative in the way that he was reading Judaism for the new generations. He himself had a very, very Orthodox training. So the beauty of his translation of Judaism was because he was from, the old country. He had all the training, the old-fashioned training, but an amazing, incredible, open mind and heart. And he influenced a whole generation, which turned out to be not really a movement in Judaism, but one of the denominations that we have today. It's a small one, but basically of people that were very influenced by this very Hasidic, really like a neo-Hasidic perspective of while the Hasidim after Second World War would make their turn to be more conservative, more Orthodox in their approach. Reb Zalman sort of became like an original Hasidic leader of the heritage of the Hasidic movement from the very past. And I was in Israel doing my my rabbinic. We're supposed to do a year in Israel while you're doing your rabbinic students in JTS. I was doing my year in Israel when I heard that Reb Zalman was going to the Sinai and was going for Pesach to climb Mount Sinai. Actually, it wasn't Pesach, it was Shavuot. And I joined and I went to see, and I fell in love with very charismatic. And I thought to myself, there's so many connections between this very, very, exciting and colorful way of dealing with Judaism that would resonate well in Brazil.
So talk about that. What is distinctive about the Jewish community in Brazil, and how what you saw or experienced with Reb Zalman you felt would resonate? So first, what's distinctive about the Brazilian Jewish community, and what is it you hope to bring them?
Well, first of all, I don't think the best, maybe one of the things that we enjoy most is that most Jewish communities are very similar. This is something so interesting. I think that we feel so. It's such a special feeling to go to a different place in the world. You go to, to Europe. You go to South Africa. You go to a different place, and when you go into a shul, you have this feeling that you're going into your own home. Now you can see the faces. You can see who is the gabbai. You see who is the person that all the characters that we have in a synagogue. You'll find in every synagogue. So the Jewish community is sort of recent in Brazil. We have to explain that Brazil has two different Jewish connections. The first Brazilian Jewish connection is very, very ancient for in terms of Brazilian history. Brazilians, to give you an idea, in the 15th and 16th century, after the discovery of Brazil, in the city of Rio de Janeiro, where I am now, 25% of the white population, 1 in every 4 Europeans, which were the white in town, were Jewish. Actually not Jewish, they were new Christians. They had to convert in Portugal, but they came to Brazil to try to escape from the Inquisition, and they came in a big number. So the Brazilian population is very influenced by, has a lot of Jewish blood in it. It is no wonder that since Spain and Portugal decided to give citizenship to all the Sephardic families that could prove that they come from the Iberia Peninsula, a lot of Brazilians got Portuguese and Spanish citizenship. Brazilians that didn't have any idea that they had a Jewish connection, and they searched it because they wanted to get the passport. So they searched, and even like major families, like well-established Christian families in Brazil that are getting passports in Portugal because they're Jewish, and it's like a trend in Brazil nowadays. But so you have this very ancient story of Brazil, history of Brazil, that actually there is a new museum that is being created in the countryside of in between Rio and São Paulo, basically telling a lot of the history of the what is called the new Christians, or the crypto Jews in Brazil. And then you had in the late 1800s, you had some Sephardic that came from Morocco to Brazil because of the rubber exploitation in the north of Brazil, in the Amazon. And they migrated, they came to Rio too, and São Paulo. And it was like my grandparents after, in between the two wars, the first and the second war, that we got most of the influx of Jews from Eastern Europe, and then we had, after the Holocaust, we also got some of the survivors, and also in 1956, when the Egyptians expelled the Jewish community from Egypt, Brazil received also a good contingency of Egyptian Jews that came, and that was basically the last major migration to Brazil.
And how would you characterize the Torah, the Jewish perspective that you sought to bring back to Rio and have brought back to Rio?
Yeah, sorry, Elie, I didn't answer to complement your first question, but it's basically answering your question now.
Yeah.
I was saying, so the Jewish community is very similar everywhere.
Yeah.
But once you start having new generations, now we have second, third, even fourth generations of Brazilian-born people already born in this country, then you start getting influenced by the particularities that every country, every place has. And in that sense, that's what I think I saw 30, 40 years ago. And I was sort of predicting that we would get to the situation that we are now. What are the Brazilian characteristics that I think really have gone into the new generations? And it's a natural thing. It's not exactly assimilation. It's maybe the opposite of assimilation. Is like is the way that we got hummus and falafel into Jewish history, the way we got gefilte fish in Jewish history, the way that we all got the flavors of the different places where Jews have resided and lived in the past. And so Brazilians have this very, very open mind. They're very liberal in a very interesting way, because Brazil is a sort of a melting pot like the United States. But in some levels, it's much more well resolved in some of the issues of bringing the population together, the intermingling of blacks and whites in Brazil, even with the Indians. So Brazil is really a melting pot, a genetic melting pot. even though we don't have, we do have a lot of prejudice in Brazil. You know, we're not free from that. And that prejudice is felt not so much in, in behavior, in not treating the others equally, which in general, Brazilians are very open and warm, and they do treat everybody openly, regardless of whatever color of skin or whatever. But economically, you know, the blacks in Brazil who were slaves were never really well protected, and they never really made it into higher social levels. So that prejudice is very much a social situation, much more than a behavior, person-to-person situation. So Jews were always very welcome in Brazil. You know, we always ask ourselves if there's any anti-Semitism in Brazil. There are pockets of anti-Semitism in Brazil coming from, you know, a very, very conservative church that was established in Brazil and areas, you know, in the northeast of Brazil. That has really improved since the important moves that the Catholic Church made in the 60s, and from then on. We had pockets of anti-Semitism because in the south of Brazil, from where I come, there was this very, very large German community. And during the war, they were very, very much aligned with Germany. And so in the 40s, even the president of Brazil was somehow had to be convinced to get into the war at the side of the Allies and against Germany. But besides that, the Brazilian people, they're very appreciative of religion. If you walk in the streets with a kippah, you won't get any bad treatment for that. Mostly people feel very respectful that you have your tradition. They admire you because you have, you know, roots, an identity. So this is very much the most of the Brazilian atmosphere in the country. So I really felt that a very creative, a very open, musical, dancing Judaism could resonate well with the new generations.
So in that regard, again, I'm always with one eye on the clock. We have about 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ari to take questions from the large number of people watching. So there's two topics I want to have you address, and I'll take them one at a time. The first is what we would find in going to your synagogue and what's distinctive about it, and your journey of creating that synagogue. And then the second, we'll be talking about the Midrash Cultural Center and your writing. So not a lot of time.
Okay.
So first, your synagogue, the Jewish Congregation of Brazil. You noted that it was the first conservative synagogue in Rio, or in Brazil, I should say. What set apart Jewish Congregation of Brazil from what existed, and what was that journey like for you?
Well, we did all the steps. We were the first egalitarian synagogue in Brazil. I'm talking national. We had just the blending of conservative, which means we have daily minions, but we are also renewal. So we have a lot of singing. I did a lot of research in music, and I also adapted a lot of local music. That's one of the ideas of renewal Judaism, is to, it's very much like they did in Europe. Most of the nigunim that we sing, you know, they're influenced by very popular songs from Russia and from Ukraine and from those areas. So we did that also in Brazil. We don't use Portuguese. I avoid as much as possible the use of Portuguese, because we use Portuguese obviously to explain, but I really push for the Hebrew language to be learned. So we were very participative synagogue. I was by myself as a rabbi for over 30 years at the synagogue, and I travel a lot. I did a lot of my other, involvements with culture and writing. I was able to do it because I have probably like 15 or 20 people that can lead any service during the year. So it was very heavily on teaching and empowering people so that they could do things. As when people do, when they lead, when they're there, when they're demanded, they create such an incredible link to tradition, to the community. That was one of the things that I did. The other thing that I did was one of my second strategy was to make the Jewish community value their tradition by showing that tradition to the outside world and having the outside world recognize that tradition as interesting, as filled with wisdom, and then get them interested because the non-Jews were interested in stuff that belonged to their heritage.
Well, that's a great bridge for you to talk about the institution you also created, the Midrash Cultural Center. I had the privilege to be in that beautiful multi-storied space. I know you've won an architectural prize for the building itself. Talk about your goals in creating and now facilitating Midrash Cultural Center.
Yeah, I always wanted to give the community, mainly to the new generations, a sense of Jewish pride. We had, the older generations had that Jewish pride from all our history, from, the creation of the State of Israel, from the pains of the Holocaust, from, it came from that very, very, incredible history that we have. But the new generations wanted something that would make them proud, not only looking backwards, look back and trying to look at just on the historical situations of the Jewish people. So somehow I mirrored in the experience that we had in Brazilian society, where we have created the leading hospitals of Brazil. In Sao Paulo, we have a hospital called Einstein, who is the leading hospital of Brazil. And by creating something that is not Jewish in essence, is not part of the Jewish tradition as an institution, but it's an institution that serves the whole community with incredible values, with excellency, and all that creates such an important, capital for the community, So I thought of doing something similar by using the culture of becoming, of creating an institution that would be leading in presenting diversity in culture, presenting all different issues that had to do with a lot of, minority causes, bringing all sorts of civil rights events. And we were very successful, and Midrash Cultural Center became a very, very recognized cultural place in Rio de Janeiro. We also won not only on the architectural aspect, but we won right before the pandemic. We won the most important award, cultural award of the city, and in recognition of a place that we had Jewish culture, we had Jewish events, and there was a program on Jewish subjects, but it was open to every subject, and it became really like this cult place in Rio de Janeiro, that for theater, for movies, for cinema, for movies, and for literary events, and for me it was a strategy of also creating for the younger generation to feel proud that the Jewish community could have something that was avant-garde, that it could be presenting the leading issues, the most important issues, very courageous issues, and that would be under a Jewish institution flag, whatever.
Well, it's an amazing achievement. And for everybody listening, when you go to Rio, visit the Midrash Cultural Center. It's maybe something else you saw in New York, the 92nd Street Y, recreated in your own distinctive way in Rio. So the last topic, and again, not enough time, is your writing. You are widely known in Brazil through your plays, through your movie, through the 18 books that you have written. If you had to summarize your 18 books into one sentence, what would it be?
It would be that they're not 18, they're 26 now.
Oh, wow. So you've only gotten more prolific.
But I know, yeah, but it all started with that strategy of trying to, when I wrote books, all my books are about Judaism. I always write as a rabbi. And, but I try to write in a very creative way, and to present my work is not, I write as a rabbi, but for a non-Jewish audience. And that was I had the 3 books that were, began my career as a writer. There were a trilogy on Kabbalah. It was called Kabbalah of Money, Kabbalah of Food, and Kabbalah of Envy. When those books came out on 1986, 7 or 8, nobody was talking about Kabbalah. There was no Kabbalah Center in the United States. There was no Madonna. Nobody was talking about Kabbalah. So, and I looked at Kabbalah as a way to, I wasn't talking about Kabbalah in the way that people use nowadays, as a mystical. I was using Kabbalah to present a very interesting platform of thinking, in different levels, like we have in the Kabbalistic tradition. And it's very interesting because there was an article in the New Yorker long ago, and in the late 80s or beginning of 90s, where they described that, I don't remember who was the actress, Hollywood actress from our area, that had a personal trainer that was Brazilian. And he gave her a book that was the Kabbalah of Money, that was already printed in English. And she gave to Madonna. And that was one of the beginnings of Madonna's interest in this whole thing of Kabbalah. There wasn't anything. It was, I think there was a very beginning of what was to be the Kabbalah Center in California. But I was a pioneer in using that. And it was a strategy for me. Again, I was doing that to have the non-Jews interested, and the Jews say, wow, what is this? What is this all about? From our own tradition. And it was very much from there that I grew into a writer. Today I'm part of the Academy, Literary Academy in Rio de Janeiro. And there was a demand that became like I sold over 1 million books of this trilogy in Brazil, which in Brazil is, I was for over 30 weeks on the 10 first, the leading best-selling books. So from there it started, and I get demand from my own publishing house, write more. That's why I ended up writing so much. King Solomon says, don't write too many books, enjoy life, but but I enjoy writing, and it was a way of fulfilling a very creative aspect of my rabbinic work.
It's an amazing achievement. I will add for those listening that the Kabbalah, that the trilogy is also in English. I have seen them in my local Barnes and Noble in Tustin. And you have, to a colleague, 3 major achievements: a synagogue community, a cultural center, and writing that spun off into plays and even film. So with that, there's so much more to dig down in terms of each of these topics. I'm going to turn it over to Ari, because I know people have been posting questions, and then I'll reserve a closing question. Go ahead, Ari.
Thank you, Rabbi Spitz, for the great questions, and Rabbi Bonder for the great answers. Learned a lot more about your community than I ever knew before. So I've been watching people's questions, and people feel free to keep sending your questions as well. I'll open the chat actually to everybody right now so you guys can see what's going on here. But first was not a question, but just a share. We have a rabbi, I guess, who has spent time in your community. He said when you were very young, I guess he was at the, is it Rabbi Nelson? I'll see him in a second here. Rabbi David Nelson. Anyway, he wanted me to mention that the Jewish community in America, really, its origins are from Brazil. It's the Jewish community from Recife. So I'm not, I come from Lithuania to South Africa to America, but the American Jewish community that I came here to see has its roots in your part of the world. So that's something very cool. And if people don't know about it, they should know about it. And I believe it was in the 1600s when a small group arrived in New York, maybe earlier than that. So for first question, going back to your synagogue, I asked you in our pre-discussion here how we can join you and see your service. And particularly, I'm very interested in your music and seeing how you run a service. So I looked online, I couldn't find your streaming. So you mentioned it was on Zoom. So the first question is, why did you choose to stream it in a very limited way as opposed to sharing it? The other rabbis we've met from Latin America have a very robust streaming business, I would say, or streaming ability and capacity, and they stream their services. You seem to have selected a different way of doing it. Can you talk about that, and then how we can actually see your service and learn about your music?
Okay, I chose Zoom because I'm all for community. From the very beginning, my work was the challenge of creating community. Even though I do respect and like and love being together virtually, I really think that the strength of the Jewish community is community. So when the pandemic started, I remember it was Purim time 2 years ago, and I had come from England, and there was this already, the Italians were getting sick and all that. And when I got here, right after Purim, I got a call from somebody that lived in New York, a young woman, and she said to me, Rabbi Bonder, close your synagogue immediately. And I said, but all the synagogues in Brazil are open. They're not, it's not that, widespread in Brazil. She said to me, my husband comes from this upstate New York synagogue where there was this horrible, there was a bar mitzvah where so many people were sick and died. You have to close your synagogue. And I was thinking, how can I do that? How can you close the synagogue? When do you open? How do you do it? So I started, just by chance, I spoke with a person in São Paulo who was the chairman of Qualcomm. It's a major international technological company. And he said to me, oh, why don't you use Zoom? And I said, what is Zoom? And he said to me, we own Zoom. They sold Zoom like 6 months before the pandemic. He wasn't very happy because of that. And he said, maybe Zoom will help you. And he said, you call my secretary, she will set you up with Zoom and you can use it. So on that very moment, I called and I opened this 500 members synagogue through Zoom. And I loved it because I could see, I can see now, and so many times I've been looking, trying to see who is here, to see faces. And for me, it was a savior for maintaining the community together. So I didn't want to go into YouTube and be me, myself, another chazan or a musician, whatever, and doing a show for the people. I wanted to be together with them. I wanted to be able to activate the sound and have the Kaddish Yatom done by the people that were, grieving, and it really helped me. So I never moved from that situation. I wasn't very concerned about getting too many new participants in that remote way. But whoever wanted to join us on Zoom was welcome. And I think it was a very, very interesting decision for the kind of community that we are, which are very, very sort of connected. And people felt that we were connected, and it was not just a screen, but faces were there sharing the moments of praying and
so how can we, but if we, I mean, just so you know,
certainly I can. What happened now is that hoping for this to last, we right after what is our Carnival, which is the beginning of the season here, of the regular season, we went back to the synagogues where we're having presential meetings at the synagogue, and we are keeping the Zoom system, so you can pass you the link and you can watch. I myself, I'm leading services only once a month. We have a second rabbi, Rabbi Dario Baile, who is working with me, and I've been doing many other things. So I've been taking less of the regular routine services, but certainly I can pass you the link. And to be honest, we're just exploring what we got to do from now on. So we might, now that we have our community back in the synagogue, we might go back to having a YouTube, just a presentation of what we do.
Do you tell us a little bit about how many people come to your services on an average Friday night and a Saturday morning, maybe before COVID, so we get an idea of how active your community is?
Before COVID, we would get 250 people on a Friday night. And if we're not doing anything special, we could have Friday nights with 800 people, but on a regular basis, it's 102, 250, maybe 300 on a Friday night. In the morning in Brazil, coming to Shacharit is very difficult in a city like Rio, which is a beach city. So you have like a beautiful morning on a Saturday, and you're competing with the beaches, and it's not that easy. But we have a regular group of around 100 people, very good daveners. If you come to the synagogue, you'll see there's a lot of participation and a lot of leading. People just everybody's participating. So it's a very lively community.
So we know you mentioned Purim, which is, same thing here. Purim is when we shut down 2 years ago, but it leads me to two questions. Do you have any Purim traditions that are unique to your community in Brazil that you may want to share with us? And my second question is Carnival and the Jews, but go ahead with Purim first.
Yeah, for us, because Purim and Carnival come sometimes almost at the same time, So we use, it's our standard practice in Purim. We use a lot of the, it's like the special musics that we have, songs, like very, very popular songs that we have for Carnival. They're called marchinhas. They're sort of interesting. They're sort of funny. They're very, very, joyful little songs. Some of them are like samba kind of music, but it's very creative music used only for Carnival. Even the schools of samba use some of those musics. And so we usually Purim for us is this: we read the Megillah. We stop at night. We stop at every chapter, And then we have a round of, we always have like a pasuk that we sing. We start with this sort of nigun with a pasuk, and then we go into this marchinhas de carnaval, which are the carnival songs. People know those songs, and it becomes very happy with a little schnapps. It's not that difficult to lighten up the room.
How do you spell that word, machinas?
Marchinha. Marcha is like a march, like,
Yeah.
you know, because people would dance, you know, in Carnival. So marchinhas is like little march, like.
Great. Do Jews participate in Carnival? Like, is that something that you go out and do? You showed us how you take Carnival into Purim, but do you go into Carnival itself?
I mean, not as a Jewish community, because it's, you know, it's a very pagan. The origins are probably the same origins as Purim in the sense of prehistoric festivals. But you know, this year I was elected ambassador of Rio. So by talking to you now, I'm doing one of the, you know, one of the things that I'm expected to do. So I've been involved with, you know, this during the Carnival we have schools of samba, which are like groups of 3,000-4,000 people that dance. They have a contest to see who is the champion of the year, you know. So those schools, I've been part of one school. I helped with the theme of one of the schools that had a Jewish theme on Moses, and I helped them, you know, counseling them on how to do that. So I'm involved. I'm very involved with the entire Brazilian society. I'm part of the Observatory of Human Rights for the Brazilian government. I'm involved in NGOs in Brazil. So my work has been always from within the community to the outside, and from the outside to the community. But Carnival, it's in that way. I respect Carnival, and whenever we can be joining and the Jewish community somehow helping that folklore of Brazil, not in a religious way, but in a folkloric way, I'm there.
Last few questions, and I'll turn it back to Rabbi Spitz. You are, you and I think your synagogue, very involved in fighting for certain rights, and I think for the environment, and so on and so forth. So what is your interactions with the government, with Bolsonaro, who I note his first name is Yair, so I assume he's must be Jewish, but that was a joke. But it's a Jair Bolsonaro, correct?
You know, yeah, it has been a problem to the Jewish community. Bolsonaro was elected with a heavy support from the evangelicals of Brazil. And the evangelicals have Israel, you know, and you probably know that from the United States and the way the evangelicals have supported politically Israel. But in Brazil, it was a real mess for the Jewish community, because Bolsonaro, because he wanted to present himself well for the evangelical community, he made himself pro-Israel in a way that is not only pro-Israel politically, not for the state of Israel, but using symbols as the Israeli flag, using you know, the name Israel, and somehow tied to his policies, to his you know, his ideology. And that was very confusing for the Jewish community. There was a big scandal in Brazil that was right before he was elected, where he was going to speak in Hebraica, who is the Jewish social club in, there's one in São Paulo and there's one in Rio. In São Paulo, Hebraica is a major club with more than 5,000 members, and they declined at the last moment. They canceled that presentation of Bolsonaro. And in Rio, because the club is very, very small, and a very small group of people have the controlled that club. They maintained his talk, his speech at Hebraica. And he was using Israeli flags, and this was being broadcasted nationally. And he was saying very, very bad things, like bad things against, he has a very, very strong anti-Indian, even some racist way of presenting his ideas. And he was doing some horrible work for the Jewish community, speaking at Hebraica, that nobody knew was this non-representative club in Rio with Israeli flags behind him, saying things that nobody that survived the Holocaust or is, has the heritage of the Holocaust in his history would ever be able to listen to or accept what he was saying. So that was very, very big. I myself went to the press and said that it was not representative of the Jewish community. You can imagine this was a whole big thing. And we have elections in another few months, hoping that Israel will have somebody that will be Jews, and Israel will have somebody here in the government that will be respecting of the state of Israel and the Jews, but that will come with ideas that are not from the Middle Ages.
When I mentioned that, he was Jewish, that was actually a joke, Rosa Berman. So I want to make sure I noticed that his first name was Jair, which is Yair.
I know. And he used a lot of his sort of connections. He went to Israel. The first person that came to Brazil to visit him and was Netanyahu and all this. And at the beginning, it was, it looked like it was a nice thing, but then it was really using Israel and whatever it means for the evangelicals for his own benefit.
Don't worry, we have nothing like that happening in the United States of America.
I know.
You know that.
He's a apprentice of what you created.
Last two questions from me, real quick. Number one, just the overall Jewish community in Rio is about 30,000. And is the Jewish community generally involved? Are they not involved in Jewish activities? Is it a close Jewish community? Do you have interactions with other parts of the community, like the Orthodox and the Reform? Can you tell us about the nature of the community?
Yeah, the community, I think it's very similar to what you have in the United States. In major cities, you have a better situation where you have, the community is strong, and you have strong institutions. São Paulo is a major city, is the largest community. There is a lot of intermarriage, like in the United States. I would say it's very similar. We have a very similar kind of lifestyle as in the US, in the larger cities in Brazil. Well, there is communication with for sure with the Reform synagogues, with Orthodox synagogues too. In a way, it's interesting. If you go to smaller communities, we all share the same balabatim. We all share the same people that, the families that are, helping, the benefactors. So we had to create a certain respect, even though there is, like in any other place, there is competition in many aspects, but there is respect. I would say there is a lot of respect, and whenever we can do things together, we try to do. Even though it is, it's each group tries to do their own activities.
Right.
There are a few things that the community do together, though.
So my last question is about Immoral Soul, which is a book you wrote that was turned into a play, that was turned into a movie. Can you just tell people what that's about, and then I'll yield my rest of my few minutes to Rabbi Spitz.
Okay. Well, Immoral Soul was a book written some 25 years ago, where I tried I was inspired by Jewish tradition, where what is our tradition? We have a tradition that is very, very thorough. It's like, we we are known by the whole world as the people that were able to maintain their identity and tradition. At the same time, when you start reading the Bible, you know, the whole Torah, and Genesis in particular, is with there is this idea that a certain degree of transgression, a certain degree of rupture is fundamental. So we go from Abram that, you know, goes away from his family. That's not a very Jewish thing to do, you know, and the whole idea of moving on that starts with Abram. Then we have laws concerning who is the firstborn, and those laws are transgressed, you know, and they're taken to new levels to the point where, you know, where Rivka lies to Isaac, and we have this whole. So I had this presentation of the Bible as presenting two different aspects of life that have to somehow to be integrated. One aspect is what I call the body, who is the body wants to be in the comfortable place. The body has to respect, you know, its own history. And what I call the soul is the part of us that is ready to evolve, that it is ready to move on, to open, you know, new possibilities that were to this point thought to be impossible. So what I called immoral soul was, first of all, I was changing the idea that the body is the immoral thing, that people are seduced by the body, that the body is where all the sins, you know, dwell. And I presented the idea, no, it's the soul that wants to venture. It is the soul that is the immoral, not in the sense of doing immoral things to the other, but saying to my own person, try to do something out of the box, you know, being immoral to my morality, to the way that I constructed my own world, to have the courage to leave that platform and move on like Abraham did, and evolve and go to a new land that you don't even know what it is. God will show you how to get there. So basically it was that. And it was very, the book was, you know, adapted to this play, and the play became a cult play in Brazil. It has been playing to this very day. It stopped during the pandemic, but it's back with, you know, sold out in many of its presentations for over 15 years, nonstop.
So I'll take the last question. Again, I'm delighted to know of your successes and the way that you've been able to bring some of the influences of the United States, or the better influences of the United States, to Brazil and to impact your community. With Purim on Wednesday night, 2 days away, that is the first event that was closed off in our synagogue. You mentioned that you've just reopened. So as Rabbi Bonder, what's your closing words for us about moving on from COVID, about this transition?
It is a big challenge. It is a big challenge. When Adi was asking about the Jewish community, how it is, to be very honest, I myself don't know exactly what is the state of the community at this point. You know, how we're gonna all recover, not only from the pandemic, but recover from the institutional, you know, damage that was done. You know, we have to reconstruct many things, and we have to see how our behavior was changed during this 2 years. What I would say is, like, our tradition is so resilient, and we usually take too seriously the events that happen in our time, in our life. If we look in perspective, and Purim is always a way of looking into perspective. Tomorrow, I have a live here in Brazil, presenting this study about the Hasidei, the devotes of Queen Esther, which is a group of new Christians in Brazil in the 1800s. They used the statue of Mary, and they made it into Queen Esther's representation for them, because for them at that time, being oppressed by the Inquisition, they had a sense that even in Brazil we would have a Purim, that situation would turn its, and it will be possible to go from a time of oppression to a time of freedom, of joy. So we have to all get into this spirit. We were locked down on Purim, right after we danced in Purim and we read the Megillah, and she used this idea of Purim now of resilience, and knowing that we'll go back to, even if we have a war now and we have all different things, we have a price to pay for climate change and all this, but we will make it. We'll survive that too, and we'll be creative. We'll be joyful to be able to reconstitute, our institutions and communities in a different way. It's gonna be better. It's always gonna be better. There's no other way. We would never accept it to be in a different direction.
I just want to thank you. I'm going to give Ari the last word. I want to thank you, Rabbi Bonder, Nilton, for making this time. You leave us with both your story of Brazil, the building of community and building Jewish pride, with the sense of possibilities that allow us to feel the possibility of resiliency. Thank you. And one of the gains of this period of COVID has been what you've achieved, Ari, with these opportunities of Zoom to be an expanded community of learners. So thank you again, Ari, with the last word.
You're welcome.
I want to give a word of praise for Ari, because I think he really understood how this platform could be used. And it is an incredible achievement to have hundreds of people in little screens here, sharing moments like this 405 fifth encounter.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Spitz, Rabbi Bonder. It has been a pleasure. Rabbi Spitz and I sat down and I said, well, you may have retired from CBI, but we've got some big plans online. Who are your most interesting people you've met on all your adventures? And so we did this trilogy. We have now been to South America. Everybody, hope you enjoyed your stay. Please come back. I guess, CSP is going to have to do an in-person trip to South America to meet Rabbi Bonder and Rabbi Gottfried and Rabbi Avruch. It's funny to see, we all here in the United States think of Judaism as an English Judaism, and I talked to the rabbis in South America, and they have a different view of the world, and no one's view is the right view. But what's nice is that, yes, we can all pray together and we can talk together and learn from each other. So thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to reading some of Rabbi Bonder's books. Thank you, Rabbi Spitz. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. See you lots this week. Keep safe, and get your traveling going. Bye, everybody. Take care.